Good morning. I'm Mary Moglia-Cannon, your service leader. I'm joined by Jeremy Johnchik on AV, and Judith Gear will be today's lector. Special thanks to you, Judy, for setting us on a path of inviting India Walton here as a Sunday speaker. A few housekeeping items. Our pianist, Madeline Hartz, fell ill last night, so there are changes to the music on the order of service. And also, due to COVID, we still don't allow singing, and we require everyone to remain masked, except for moments while at the podium. So if you come up for a joy and concern or you're speaking, you can remove your mask and then put it back. Lastly, we have not yet resumed coffee hour. We see it in the future, but it's not yet. So still, even with all these restrictions, how great is it that we are well enough to be together again in person? Please take a moment and greet the person next to you. We celebrate not only being here in church, but being in the good company of India Walton, someone who models what it means to be a person of action, a community planner who sees the intersectionality of food, health, housing, reproductive, and environmental inequity. India not only sees, but she solves, arriving at answers for justice from a place of love in action. Welcome, India. And welcome all members, friends, and visitors to UU of East Aurora. This is a community in which all people are welcomed regardless of their belief systems, ethnicities, race, gender, sexual orientation, or economic standing. We, the UUs in the house, often choose to push ourselves out of our comfort zone, and we try to recognize discomfort as evidence that we're growing. Today, if you feel discomfort rise within you, we invite you to practice being curious, to allow your discomfort to lead you to new learning. To those who are here new as visitors, welcome to a safe space. Before we begin, are there any announcements?
Good morning. I'm Rich Moglia-Cannon. I'm the board chair, and I wanted to let all of you know that the numbers are coming down so much that the board's going to reconsider our restrictions next week. The CDC just issued new guidance on when you need to be masked and when you're not. So when we have a chance to look that over, we might, who knows, have a coffee hour. I don't know if we want to bring back singing because this group isn't that good. No. But anyway, thank you.
And I have an announcement as usual. Last week, we launched an important and exciting social campaign. What makes it important is that it pays attention to a well-known and unfortunate fact, that food scarcity and soil toxicity exist for many in Buffalo, but particularly for the people of Buffalo's east side. What makes it exciting is that UUEA members often say, standing vigil for racial justice is fine, but let's find ways to be impactful in action. And this is one example. An anonymous member of this church offered to match the purchase of CSA shares from Laura Culligan of Dirt Rich Farm in Springville to give to the people of Buffalo's east side. For those who don't know, Laura Culligan of Dirt Rich grew up attending UUEA. That's another reason to be excited. This campaign not only helps people in Buffalo who have limited access to the healthy soil we have an abundance of here in the South Towns, but it supports a small local farmer whom we care about. That means that if we raise $3,200 as a group to buy 5 shares from Dirt Rich Farm, we will actually be able to buy 10 shares. And this is not just about us, it is a collaboration. The African Heritage Co-op has donated the transportation from Springville to the Michigan Street corridor, and community leaders in the corridor will in turn distribute this fresh organic produce to people in need on a weekly first come, first served basis. So there's no waste, and dozens of families are able to benefit over the 19 weeks. Since last week, our treasurer told me that we reached $1,945 so far. Thank you so much to those who sent donations already. To those who haven't, please consider sending something this week. Whether your donation is large or small, it doesn't matter. It's about doing this together. Donations would be made out to UUEA either by check or online at uuea.org. You can note online that the money is earmarked for farm shares, and UUEA will give the money to Dirt Rich Farm for this effort, and that will start the process. Please know that these donations do not support the church in any way. I begin this service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on the ancestral land of Native nations and the stolen labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. Our prelude was written and performed in 2020 by Dr. Yisawe Barnwell with the UU General Assembly Virtual Choir.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
We light this flame as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness as superior. May it spark a spirit of humility. May it ignite a radical love that transforms into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope, shining a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and act boldly towards our highest ideals. And now our opening.
First of all, India and I did not call each other last night to color coordinate. It's a case of great minds thinking alike. I'm not sure. We who are height challenged always have a do with the microphone. When I was asked to give the readings for this service, I was honored because I have a great deal of regard for India Walton. She exhibits qualities I deeply admire, like courage, patience, fortitude, and perseverance. I quickly realized that she's a worthy, inspirational descendant of a few centuries of feisty New York women, whether they were born and raised here or whether they adopted our state as their home later in their lives. Women like Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, Sarah Garnett, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Mary Talbot, just for starters. Up to more recent warriors for human rights like Bella Abzug, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Louise Slaughter. I had many wise words from these ladies to choose from for today's readings, but I surmised that maybe brief stories starring a couple of them might be more to the point. In the course of my research, I ran across someone I was delighted to think of again, Shirley Chisholm. If you paid attention to political goings-on in the 1970s, you would remember Shirley Chisholm. She was the first Black woman to be elected to the United States House of Representatives. Her district was from Brooklyn. That was in 1968, and she was continuously reelected to that position until her retirement from Congress in 1983. Also in 1972, she was the first Black candidate to run for a major party's presidential nomination and the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. India reminds me of Shirley because in their political lives, nobody gave them anything. What they became politically, they earned on their own. During Shirley Chisholm's first campaign for public office, the party regulars didn't want her to run. She ended up beating her opponents in the primary, all of whom were men, and she went on to defeat the Republican in the general election as well. Anyway, I love the following quote by Shirley Chisholm because I think it's a perfect evocation of her answer to the barriers she faced. And from what I've been able to surmise, what India Walton has faced too. Chisholm said, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." Shirley Chisholm died in 2008 and is buried just up the road here in Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo. The inscription on her tombstone reads, "Unbought and unbossed."
The offertory is a moment in our service to remind us that UUEA cannot do anything without its members and friends showing up and supporting each other. Sincere thanks to those who participate in events, volunteer their time, share their talents, or are in a position to be generous with their treasures. If you are inclined to give, you may donate at uuea.org, or there is a plate on the bookcase on your way out. The offertory is Bill Withers' "Lean on Me" from Song Around the World.
Sometimes in the light
Most public places in the South at that time had rules about segregation. So the venue in which this conference took place stipulated that white people sat on one side of the hall and Black people sat on the other side. When Mrs. Roosevelt entered the room, she quickly scoped out the situation and knew what her course of action was going to be. She sat down on the Black side of the hall. The police chief in Birmingham at that time was one of the most notorious bigots in 20th century American history, a guy named Bull Connor. He didn't much like Mrs. Roosevelt, particularly her stance on civil rights, so he sent a policeman down to tell her to move to the other side. She refused. The policeman grew more impatient and he tapped her on the shoulder. Can you imagine doing that to the First Lady of the United States? Tapped her on the shoulder, repeating Bull Connor's command that she move. At this point, Mrs. Roosevelt stood up, and she was 6 feet tall. So when she stood up, and she called for a folding chair. When it was brought to her, she plunked it down in the aisle right between the Black and white sections of the audience. And there she sat, daring them to arrest her. They never did. And for the rest of the conference, she carried that little folding chair with her to physically demonstrate that a racist like Bull Connor could not deter her. For this and many, many other battles Eleanor Roosevelt waged in her life for equal rights, the Ku Klux Klan put a bounty on her head of $25,000. Which in the 1950s, when that challenge was made, was equal to about $250,000 in today's currency. They really wanted her gone. She, however, never gave up her fight for equal rights for racial minorities and women and died in 1962 of natural causes. Thank you for coming. It's all yours.
Born and raised on Buffalo's east side as one of 6 children, India Walton became a full-time working mother at 14. She earned her GED while pregnant with twins who were born prematurely, an experience that led her to work as a nurse in the very same NICU that where her boys were saved. India became a union representative standing up for both healthcare workers and patients, from local picket lines to the steps of the United States Supreme Court, where she spoke at a women's rally in 2014. The grave disparities in healthcare led her to become a community organizer for Open Buffalo. India is a thought leader on several issues, including criminal justice reform and fair housing. As the executive director of Buffalo's Fruit Belt Community Land Trust, India led community-directed projects for single-family home ownership, as well as a 50-unit multifamily project, clearly providing more equitable housing alternatives to the kind of development that results in displacement of people from their own communities. When I invited her to speak on this date, we realized that India would be a bridge between Black History and Women's History Month. As I researched her, I've come to think of her as a bridge between what is and what can be. We are grateful to have you here. Now there is a step forward.
Okay, thank you. These intros always make me emotional because when people talk about me, I don't sometimes realize that they're even speaking of me, and to be compared or even in proximity to folks like Shirley Chisholm and Eleanor Roosevelt is a huge honor, because it's not where I come from and it's not who I am. I guess it's who I'm becoming. And that is exciting and also confusing and scary. But thank you, Judy, for your kind words. Thank you for inviting me here. And thank you, Mary, for your tenacity and your continued follow-up to make sure that I actually made it out today. Today I want to talk about starting from a place of love. When Mary called and invited me to speak, I was navigating life in a very difficult space. I had given up my entire life, my job, my privacy, sometimes my sanity. Not only had myself and my team and my community suffered what we thought was a crushing defeat, but there was no clear pathway back to a normal life for me. So I believe that speaking with you today is critical to my personal and our collective healing. And my request of you is that I'm allowed to be just a tiny bit vulnerable and authentic in my reflections. So after the general election in November, I lost a very close friend and mentor of mine, a person that I co-founded the Community Land Trust with, Annette Lott, the cancer. So I want to dedicate this to her because she just taught me so much. And shortly after, we also lost Bell Hooks, one of the foremost feminist radical leaders who thought deeply about love. And at multiple points in the campaign, when people asked me why I would do it, I would say that it was just all about love. And I would tell my team that we lead with love. And when people are attacking us, our response is not to attack back, but to think about what brings us together and what the things are that we have most in common. Because at the end of it, we all want the same thing. We all want a healthy life. We all want safe, affordable housing. We all want clean air to breathe and water to drink. We all want a quality education for our children. And we all want justice and equity, right? So when you are deemed the thought leader in social movements, people begin to ask you what your theory of change is. Now, keep in mind that I'm no sociologist. Socialist, yes. Sociologist, no. But in thinking about the value of social movements, the one thing that we really want to be able to do is to create change. There are a few reasons why social change is important, right? It brings us closer to gender equality. It improves workers' rights. It protects LGBTQ plus community. It improves racial equity. It addresses problems at their root. It empowers people. It makes life better for future generations, and it protects the environment. We're living in times right now of some significant social movement. I wake up every morning and I'm most excited to see which Starbucks is unionizing next across the country. A movement that started right here in Western New York. The rise of the working class. We've seen multiple unions go on strike to fight for better wages and working conditions. The Poor People movement, led by Reverend Barber. Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black lives. All of these are movements that we can say are changes that improves racial equity, protects LGBTQ people, right? And those are some of the things that we're looking for when you talk about your theory of change. So not only does your theory of change guide your work, but it should also give you something to refer back to, your why. Now, the really smart people, they have logic models and data-supported algorithms and flowcharts that describe their theories of change, and I admire that. But my intellectual capacity is limited by the fact that people are dying, the planet is on fire, and the sky is falling. So I don't have time for a complex logic model about the way I think the way I do. So I eventually arrived to what the theme of this talk is today, and that is love. My theory of change is love. And love means many things to many people. It means different things at different points in time and different points in your life. And, you know, as a child who grew up very poor, as a survivor of domestic abuse and gender violence, a lot of times in my life, it was the absence of love that stood out more than the presence of it, right? We always know it's there, but sometimes you don't necessarily feel it. So I would like to start with the definition that I believe most represents love to me. And in this case, this is straight from Merriam-Webster. It is the unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of one another. That's the simplest way I can describe my theory of change. It's love. Now, the question becomes, can an unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of others create the change that we desire? I would argue that the answer to that is yes. Can love improve gender equality? Can love improve workers' rights? Can love protect trans kids? Can love address the root causes of our societal ills? Violence, crime, poverty, houselessness, hunger, poor health outcomes, maternal and infant morbidity, and mortality. Yeah. Yes, love. Our collective, unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of one another can do that. Not only can it, it has. Love was mutual aid that kept our neighbors during the pandemic. Love is how we will continue to house our people, feed our people, take care of our people. Love is how we will move toward justice and progress, no matter the result of any election. That brings me to the most important part of any theory of change, the why. The why came up very often for me over the last year. It still does. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, why? From leaving secure employment to be able to stretch my imagination about what is possible, to reliving my personal disappointments, failures, and traumas in the public sphere. I won't tell you any of it was easy, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. I'll end by sharing the words of my most ardent supporter, my 12-year-old son, Mason. On election night, Mason told me that we hadn't lost, that we only lose when we stop trying, and that he hopes we can do this again. And he is so happy because we taught the world to lead with love. That's my why. Unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of one another. I'd do it again in a heartbeat because love. Thank you.
India, you are willing to do some Q&A right now, so we'll just open the floor. We are going to move a microphone to the center here, and then we want to be heard online and here, so Jeremy's going to set that up. And if anyone has a question on Zoom, please type it into the chat, and someone will be your mouthpiece here. I think, Rich, we're going to do that. And no question is off limits.
India, thank you so much. That was just wonderful. Thank you for speaking from your heart. I was wondering, so you're living your life and you're doing your good deeds, and then one day you decide to run for mayor. How did that come about?
Yeah. I can remember as a child, my mom saying to me, just because you haven't heard of something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And also that when the rules don't serve you or the laws don't serve you, it's okay to change them, right? When I was 10 or 11, my mother married a person, my dad, who was in prison serving a 25-year to life sentence on a nonviolent offense due to the Rockefeller drug laws. So I would accompany my mom to Albany frequently to fight for his release and to fight for the changing of those laws. Eventually it happened. And after serving 15 years, my dad came home. And that was proof to me that when something is wrong, even when it seems impossible, that when you love someone, you have a responsibility to fight for that change, even if it seems like it's something that you cannot do. So after the uprisings of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, I was wholly dissatisfied with the response from our local leadership. Myself and thousands of other young people locally were also very dissatisfied. We were ignored. We were called outside agitators. And though we had put a lot of thoughtful proposals forth that were well researched, data driven, and backed by science, we were ignored and told that we were just some silly kids who should go sit down somewhere and get a job and stop protesting. And I thought, wow, if we can turn out 500 people to a demonstration, we can turn these people into door knockers, into phone bankers, into petitioners, into voters. And we can prove that not only are we outside agitators and goofy kids protesting, but we can turn that protest power into real political and electoral power. And growing up in Buffalo, knowing that there are not many people who have the privilege of being untethered from the establishment and the status quo, and knowing that, like, at the end of the day, I'm an RN and no one can ever stop me from working, I figured there was no better time than the present, and there was no better person than me. So I got a group of friends together and we started planning, and that's what we did.
That talk was wonderful. Thank you. I have a brother that lives in Buffalo who was a big fan of yours, and for the what was it when you first went, and what is that called? Primary. Thank you so much. Okay, so for the primary, he certainly voted for you, and he talked to me on the phone. He was very excited, and then one day he called me and he said, "I am not going to vote for her in the election." Do you have any idea what was this not only my brother saying this, but do you have any idea if really a lot of people, if that was a cause of maybe not being able to win the race?
I have a lot of thoughts about it. I've thought deeply about it. And also the Monday morning quarterbacks and Twitter pundits have also told me all of the reasons why, how I could win a primary and lose the general. But what I will say is that winning the primary, over the summer, I was sort of a sweetheart of the progressive left, right? And there was also a very sort of rose garden strategy from the incumbent that meant that there was not the slander, the negative ads, the active negative campaigning against me that we saw in the general election. So I think that, after I won the primary, there were some things that came out about my past, some things that were downright lies, but some things that were true, right? I had unpaid parking tickets. I did. I'm a working class person. And in my opinion, if I have to choose between feeding my children and paying a parking ticket, which I believe is unjust and unfairly targets poor people and people of color to put revenue into the city budget, rather than having people pay their fair share in property taxes, right? Rather than require people who are on the city payroll to actually pay into the system that they are benefiting from, right? We charge people parking tickets. And the way those stories came out portrayed me as a person who was irresponsible, dangerous, and not fit to lead. I believe that that is the case, but what I will also say is that I still won among Democrats, right? I still won among Black and brown people, among poor people, among renters, among the people who were really excited that I had a platform that was centered around the issues of everyday people. And I think that a lot of the folks who came out to vote against me is not because they were voting for my opponent, they just needed to stop me. Because, you know, we can't have a champion for not only everyday working class people, but for those who are unseen, unheard, uncared for, marginalized, trampled on, and to have a person that's going to really lift up those people. I think it was just very scary for people who are comfortable on where they are. But I'm encouraged by the fact that there is more than one way to win. And I have now been put into a position where I am still able to move some of these policies and priorities on a different scale, a different level. For example, I am currently working with the Rochester City Council Progressive Bloc. They just introduced good cause eviction at the municipal level. And I think that those are ways that we can really put pressure on our local governments to do more legislating and less posturing.
Hi, India. Nice to have you here. I was involved with Public Employees Federation for all my working career, like 40 years, and as a statewide activist. And I'm just really appalled by what's happening with the
right. So I wait for you know, RJ and Michelle and the Starbucks United folks to tell me what they need, right? Whether it's amplifying a story, showing up to a demonstration. I'm just waiting for the day they tell us to boycott because, I mean, you know, no shade, but Starbucks doesn't have the best coffee. I only go there in support of the baristas, right? So like the day they tell me to stop purchasing Starbucks, I'm going to stop purchasing it and I'm going to encourage other folks too. But, you know, again, I take my direction from the people who are directly involved in that organizing effort. And I just do whatever they ask me to do, whether that mean I'm putting up a sign, wearing a t-shirt, trying to make connections with them between people that I've been able to meet and develop relationships with. So that's how I hope.
I found what you've had to say very educational, for instance, on what an outside agitator is, because I was a little puzzled by that in the news coverage. And I would like to hear more about your ideas for what can be done on issues like housing, on issues like policing, and I'll sit down.
Thank you for that question. Okay, so in my opinion, the root cause of most of our issues is poverty. And in my opinion, the role and responsibility of our government should be to make sure that everyone is cared for. And when we think about creating housing, when we think about reducing poverty, the question is always, well, where does the money come from? But we don't live in a society that lacks resources. It just doesn't have the proper priority, right? I just know it can be done. All right, I've done it. I've built housing with no assistance from the city. And I think like during the campaign, the joke was, well, you only built 2 houses. And it's like, we did that with 9 inexperienced community members who know nothing about development or real estate. We did that by writing grants, having never written grants before. We did that using philanthropy when there is development money from our state and federal government that is supposed to be allocated for these projects, and it is not. So if we had the cooperation of our local leadership, how much more could we have done? If those efforts were supported instead of being undermined, how much more could we have done, right? I was involved in planning and organizing a lot of the protests in 2020. And after they disbanded the emergency response team, they took police presence away from the protesters, it was peaceful. There were 0 incidences of violence. There were 0 incidences of property destruction. Do you know how we kept our people safe? We did that. We had people on bicycles who would block traffic for us or keep the counter protesters on the other side. We were able to do that for ourselves. So when I say that the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, people know what we need, where we live. We just need the resources to be able to do it, right? Buffalo has a very robust network of Block clubs and community groups and faith-based organizations who are ready and willing to do the work, but are all fighting for this very small pot of resources. Meanwhile, you have the big guys who have millions and billions of dollars who get everything. Are we seriously about to put $1 billion investment into a stadium for a family that has $6 billion? Right? Like, our priorities are just all messed up. And until we start having more conversations about why things are the way they are, it's not individual lack of responsibility or lack of individual work ethic, right? These are systems that have been put in place to keep a certain group of people from having self-determination and enough autonomy to be able to pursue a better standard of living. So we have to keep that at the forefront of our conversation.
So that's my struggle. I'm all for love, and I'm theoretically behind all kinds of causes for inequity and injustice. But I just worry that the love part makes it too easy for me to say, well, I love you, but how is that really going to change anybody's life? So, and from being, you say solutions come from where they are, where the problem lies. Well, I've lived this very privileged life out here in East Aurora, which is not terribly integrated. And so, I don't have those problems don't sit next to me. And so that's my struggle personally, is how I can take my love and support of those issues and make them happen. So I would think maybe that's shared by many people. It's, we know what the problems are, and we know how we feel about them, but we don't know what to do about them.
Yeah, I think the simplest answer is to shoot an email to whichever organization is doing the work, or whichever individual. I mean, it really warmed my heart to know that y'all are supporting the efforts to match the farm shares. It just so happens that when Alex was on that call, like, he and I were on our way to lunch and we were sitting next to each other. But that's in the simplest of forms, right? And when I talk about love, it's a verb, right? It's an action, right? How do you say that because I love humanity so much, I'm going to give up something so that someone else can have it, right? Or so that someone else can have something that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. So, I mean, like, there are lots of groups in Buffalo. There is the African Heritage Food Co-op, who now Alex is doing a capital campaign to try and put a grocery store in that fruit belt neighborhood, the same neighborhood I organized in. How we got a neighborhood called the fruit belt? You can't get fruit, right? There's Black Love Resisting the Rust that does radical political education for young people of color. There's Massachusetts Ave Project, another one that's filling in the gap for food access. There is the Health Disparities Task Force that is where, I mean, there's just, you can't, one of the best things about Buffalo is that, maybe the best and the worst, is that we have this really robust nonprofit and community-based organization structure, but like they are really filling in the gap for what is not coming from our local leadership, right? Someone has to do that work, but we have some of the best minds and hardest working folks who are doing that. So I would just encourage you to plug in where you can, and no one is gonna turn you away. And if they do, just call me and we'll go together.
Thank you so much for reminding us, because it's true, we think of love as something passive. You know, we fall in love instead of fight for love. Happiness is something that happens to us, not something that we want to struggle for. So this is just so inspiring. So please tell us that you're going to keep loving all the way to the White House.
I am going to keep loving and following my heart and the mandate of my people, and do what makes most sense, you know, not only for my community, but also for myself and my family. I have a little boy that I barely saw in the last year. So I really, like I said, I'm on a journey right now of healing, right? Not only myself, but my community, my children, my family. You know, my mother watched some of these things play out in the media, and my siblings. And right now, I'm still very much working behind the scenes, but I do feel like the sky is the limit. And when the universe is ready for me to do the next thing that I'm meant to do, I'm gonna jump in and keep going.
All right. So we have a question from Randy Hoke, and he asks, do you feel your candidacy has disrupted the status quo of the local political establishment? If so, to what degree?
Hi, Randy, and congratulations again. I don't know that it disrupted the local. I mean, like, the election happened and then like everything kind of went back to normal. I hope that in the future it will. We're sort of in an off cycle right now. I mean, there's the governor's race, but when local elections come back next year, it's my hope that we will be much more disruptive. And I know that's a part of the reason why a lot of people were sort of off put by the campaign, is that it was against the grain, and we weren't gonna wait our turn or wait to be, sort of blessed by the establishment. We were like, we want what we want, and we want it right now, so we're gonna do it right now. But I think that the people who supported me shouldn't have to suffer, right? Like I saw on the Buffalo Police Union's website, they're keeping a running list of people who supported me to watch out for. And I know that there are people right now who are struggling in their incumbencies because they supported me, and now like they're getting flack. And I don't think that's fair. And I think that people should be free and willing to support what they believe is right. And I mean, like, no one was supporting me because like I'm drop dead gorgeous or rich. People who supported me were supporting me because their constituencies had the same concerns that we were running on, right? Our platform of housing and healthcare and justice resonated with Sean Ryan's constituency, resonated with John Rivera's constituency, resonated with Rashid Wyatt's constituency, resonated with a lot more people who were afraid to come forward because they're afraid of retribution, and that is not democracy. So again, congratulations, Randy. I know you're going to do a great job in Hamburg. I look forward to supporting you in the future, and I also look forward to supporting truly progressive candidates who want to serve and don't feel like it's the other way around.
We have a question from Anne-Marie Jason, who said, I admire you greatly, India, and was excited to vote for you. There were and are so many good reasons, but perhaps the most important one was hope. You may not have won the election, but your gift of hope remains. I hope that you have a chance. Getting emotional for reading this. I hope that I have a chance to vote for you again, and who knows when. But right now, I'm wondering what your hopes are for the year ahead, and also what you'd like us to do to help you realize those hopes.
Sure. My hope for the year ahead is it's just so simple. I would love for the Governor Hochul to allocate money for Medicare for all, for the New York Health Act. I would like the New York Health Act to be passed. I would like that to include coverage for all, meaning that we extend healthcare coverage to undocumented folks. I would like to see an end to medical debt. I would like to see student debt canceled so that millennials could actually go out and buy homes and have babies and not be spending most of their already dismal incomes on repaying student debt, because higher education should be free and available to all. I don't know. I just have very lofty goals. But I think that more than anything, I want people to go out and vote, and I want the excuse to stop being that only 17% of people are turning out to the polls. And I want to make sure that the people who we put in office feel held accountable to us, and not to the real estate lobby, or not to the pharmaceutical companies, or not to the healthcare lobby that is keeping us from realizing being able to have a healthier and more just society. Thank you all.
Please join me for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Oh, yes, Shirley and Eleanor are right here in the room, cheering you on, believe me. And I'm reminded of that quote from H.L. Mencken, American women should raise more hell and fewer dahlias. So we'll forget the dahlias. But this is from Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the prime mover in getting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights passed in the United Nations. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world.
Final song is performed by Leah Morris, who's a UU talented songwriter and performer, and she provides a lot of music online to small congregations. This is Let Justice Roll Down, and it's by Aileen Vance.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society, and it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.